You won't believe the story of the Korean Mafia king who lost everything: his power, his freedom, and the love of his life. But in his darkest hour, someone unexpected showed him what true loyalty really means. Stay tuned as I dive into a gripping tale of betrayal, resilience, and forbidden love. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to witness every twist and heart-wrenching moment of this story. The city never slept, its streets alive with whispers of danger and secrets that only a select few dared to touch. Among those shadows, the name Kim Jae-hyun carried weight like no other. Once the untouchable king of Seoul's underworld, his very presence commanded respect, fear, and obedience. Businessmen, politicians, and criminals alike crossed him with caution, or not at all. His empire spanned borders, and his influence penetrated layers of society most people didn't even know existed. Yet, even in his fortress of power, Jae-hyun was human, prideful, stubborn, and, as fate would have it, tragically vulnerable. It was a night unlike any other, one that would mark the beginning of his downfall. The luxurious penthouse that overlooked the city skyline, usually a symbol of his dominance, became a prison the moment betrayal struck. His wife, the woman he had adored and trusted, walked away, not for another man, but because she could no longer bear the violent and dangerous life intertwined with his. She left behind not only her ring, but also a void that gnawed at the edges of Jae-hyun's carefully constructed life. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet, any gang rivalry, or any police raid ever could. But fate, it seemed, had more cruelty in store. A calculated assassination attempt, orchestrated by one of his closest allies, who had turned traitor, left Jae-hyun paralyzed from the waist down. The hospital rooms blurred into a haze of white walls and sterile smells, machines beeping like the ticking of an unforgiving clock. He had survived, but he was no longer the king who could stride into a room and bend it to his will. He was trapped, not by chains, but by his own body. Amidst the chaos, there was a figure in the background, a quiet, steadfast presence who never faltered. Lana, the black maid who had worked in his household for years, had always been more than a servant in the eyes of those who truly watched. She moved with a grace that seemed almost ethereal, her dark eyes observing the world with a depth that made even hardened men uncomfortable. She had served the Kim family for as long as anyone could remember, but no one truly knew the secrets she carried in her heart. Secrets of loyalty, of love, and of an unwavering belief in Jae-hyun's goodness, even when the world had turned its back on him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Jae-hyun's palace of power felt more like a gilded cage. Former allies hesitated to visit, fearing the contagious scent of failure and vulnerability. And yet, every morning, Lana would be there. She cleaned his sprawling home with meticulous care, prepared his meals, ensured his medicines were administered, and, most importantly, spoke to him when he felt words had no place in his life anymore. Her voice was steady, a lifeline in a world that had become uncertain and cruel. "You don't have to face this alone, sir," she said one morning, placing his breakfast tray within reach. Her voice was calm, warm, but carried an unspoken intensity that seemed to cut through the fog of his despair. Jae-hyun's pride bristled. He was a man who had commanded armies, who had made decisions that affected thousands. How could he allow himself to rely on someone like her? And yet, as he looked into her unwavering gaze, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: hope. The days that followed were a delicate balance of anger, pain, and begrudging acceptance. Every step Lana took to care for him, every smile she offered in moments when he was tempted to sink into bitterness, chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to realize that loyalty wasn't given. It was earned. And Lana had earned his trust without him even noticing. But the world outside his apartment was far from forgiving. Rival gangs smelled weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Former allies who had once bowed to his power now whispered in dark alleys, plotting to take advantage of a fallen king. Jae-hyun's mind raced constantly. torn between the desire to reclaim his throne and the bitter truth of his helplessness. He wanted vengeance, yet he was confined to his wheelchair, a king without a sword. It was in these moments of despair that Lana's quiet strength became his anchor. She wasn't just a maid. She was a guardian, a friend, and, unknowingly, the spark that reminded him what it meant to trust someone wholly. In the silence of the nights, when the city lights flickered against the windows and the neon signs painted the walls in shades of danger and longing, she would sit beside him, reading aloud from novels he hadn't touched in years, speaking stories that made him laugh, made him remember that life could still have color. For the first time since the betrayal, Hyun felt something he hadn't expected, the stirrings of affection that were not tainted by obligation or manipulation. Lana's presence was a balm to his fractured soul, and though he would never admit it aloud, he began to rely on her in ways he had never allowed himself to rely on anyone. Yet, love in a world of crime and power is never simple. The line between loyalty and forbidden desire is razor thin. Hyun's heart, still bruised and battered, fought against the very feelings that were quietly blossoming. He knew that giving in could lead to scandal, vulnerability, or even danger. Yet resisting felt like denying a lifeline in a storm. And as the nights grew longer, the city outside his windows restless and unforgiving, both master and maid began to realize something undeniable in a world that had abandoned him. She was the one who stood steadfast, not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of a love so quiet, so patient, that it threatened to consume them both. The city's underworld never paused, never slept, and certainly never forgave, while Hyun's penthouse had become a fortress of silence and whispered fear. Outside, rival factions moved with a predator's precision. Every glance in dark alleys, every coded message sent across phones and burner devices, spoke of an inevitable reckoning. Hyun, once untouchable, had become the prey in a game he had once mastered. But what he didn't expect was that his salvation, or perhaps his ultimate downfall, would come from someone he had never considered a player in this dangerous world. Lana continued her work with a meticulous devotion that bordered on obsession. She moved through the halls of his home with the quiet grace of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done before anyone else realized it. She tended to his needs, anticipated his moods, and ensured that no detail, however minor, was left unattended. And while Hyun's pride still flared, insisting he didn't need help, he found that he couldn't deny the comfort her presence brought. Her hands, gentle yet firm, her eyes that seemed to see the soul behind the scars, were slowly eroding the walls he had built around his heart. Yet even as trust grew, danger loomed. One night Hyun awoke to the sound of faint footsteps in his hallway. His instincts, honed over decades in the Mafia, immediately went on alert. Lana, ever perceptive, had noticed it too. She whispered, "Someone's here." Her voice low but steady, and before Hyun could respond, she had moved with remarkable swiftness. A concealed weapon, a small, sleek pistol, rested in her hand. Hyun stared, a mix of shock and awe rooting him to the spot. You've always been capable of this?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Lana's eyes met his. "I've always protected those I care about, sir. You just never noticed." The intruder was no ordinary thief or desperate criminal. It was one of Hyun's former lieutenants. Someone who had tasted power and decided it was time to claim it for himself. He moved with arrogance, confident that Hyun's paralysis made him easy prey. But Lana, calm and precise, intercepted him with a combination of agility and strategy that left him stunned. Within moments, she had neutralized the threat without a scratch on Hyun. In the aftermath, Han felt a strange mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. The reality hit him harder than any betrayal. He was no longer the dominant force he had been. His life, his empire, his control, all had shifted, and it was Lana, the woman he had overlooked, who now held his safety in her hands. Days turned into weeks, and the attacks became more frequent. Word had spread in the underworld of Hyun's weakness. Rivals, sensing opportunity, began testing the boundaries of his power, probing for weaknesses in both his business and his personal life. Yet for every shadow that crept closer, Lana was there, unflinching, unwavering. She became his eyes when he could not move, his ears when he could not hear, and his strength when his own body refused to respond. And through it all, their relationship began to shift. It was subtle at first. A lingering look. A hand brushed against his in moments of need. But the unspoken tension between them grew impossible to ignore. Hyun, who had spent a lifetime controlling every aspect of his environment, found himself powerless in the face of emotions he could no longer suppress. He realized, reluctantly and fearfully, that he was falling for Lana, and that the feeling might be mutual. One evening, as the rain lashed against the panoramic windows of his apartment, Hyun finally allowed himself to speak. "Lana," he said, his voice rough with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved me more times than I can count." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the storm outside. "You don't have to thank me, sir," she said softly. "I've always cared for you. More than I should, perhaps, but that's the truth." The words struck Hyun like a bullet. In the chaos of betrayal, power struggles, and assassination attempts, he had not considered that someone could love him purely, without expectation, without ulterior motive. He felt a surge of emotion he had long buried: hope, gratitude, and something dangerously close to desire. But the world outside was relentless. His enemies were patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They didn't just want to take his life. They wanted to dismantle everything he had built, to erase his legacy. Hyun knew that if he did not act soon, he would lose everything: his power, his freedom, and potentially Lana. Together, they began to strategize. Lana's insight into human behavior, her sharp intellect, and her unwavering courage became invaluable. Hyun, despite his physical limitations, began to regain control over his empire. Not through brute force, but through careful planning, manipulation, and trust in Lana's judgment. Each move they made was precise, each decision calculated to outsmart rivals who underestimated them both. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the city lights flickered against the glass walls and the rain painted streaks across the windows, their connection deepened. Lana's care was no longer just about duty, it was about love. And Hyun, despite years of fear, pride, and hardened walls, allowed himself to feel it fully. But danger was never far behind. One fateful night, a betrayal closer than he ever imagined threatened to shatter their fragile peace. A trusted lieutenant, someone Hyun had considered a brother, revealed their plan to a rival faction. The attack was swift, violent, and nearly successful. Lana, always vigilant, acted with a ferocity that left Hyun breathless, saving his life once more but revealing the true stakes of their situation. Survival would demand not only cunning but unwavering trust. And perhaps sacrifices neither of them were ready to make. As dawn broke over Seoul, painting the skyline in hues of gold and crimson, Hyun realized the truth he had been avoiding. Lana was no ordinary servant. She was the anchor to his soul, the shield to his body, and the force that reminded him he was still capable of love, even when the world had abandoned him. And, in that realization, a dangerous thought took root. If they could survive the betrayals, the enemies, and the treachery, could they survive the undeniable attraction that burned between them? Could a paralyzed Mafia king and his black maid, bound by loyalty, danger, and unspoken love, truly find a future together in a world built on deception and power? The answer would not come easily. The next moves, the next betrayals, and the next confrontations would test them in ways neither could anticipate. And as the city stirred awake, unaware of the battles waged in shadows and penthouses, both Hyun and Lana knew one truth above all: together, they were stronger than the world could imagine. But even together, the price of love in the Mafia could be deadly. The city was restless, as if it could sense the storm about to descend on Hyun's world. Word of his survival had spread through the underworld like wildfire. Rivals had regrouped, allies had wavered, and enemies he had once crushed underfoot now prepared to finish what had been started. Jae-yun, paralyzed yet unbroken in spirit, had reclaimed some of his power through strategy, cunning, and Lana's unwavering support. But he knew deep down that the coming days would demand more than intellect. They would demand courage, sacrifice, and an unflinching heart. It began with a message, delivered discreetly to his penthouse, a warning that a rival faction planned a full-scale attack on his remaining operations. They knew about his paralysis. They assumed his weakness was final. They assumed wrong. Jae-hyun sat in his wheelchair, staring at the city lights that stretched infinitely beyond the windows. Lana approached, her expression calm yet tense, carrying a tablet that displayed the details of the enemy's plan. She had spent hours deciphering patterns, tracing networks, and predicting movements. She had become more than a maid, she was strategist, confidante, and shield all in one. "We need to move fast," Lana said, her voice steady but firm. "If they strike tonight, we could lose everything. But if we act carefully, we can turn their aggression against them." The Jae-hyun's mind raced. He had once relied on brute force, on fear and intimidation, but now he relied on Lana's insight and his own sharpened intellect. He realized that true power wasn't always physical. It was strategic, emotional, and sometimes terrifyingly personal. As night fell, the streets of Seoul seemed to hold their breath. Jae-hyun and Lana orchestrated their defense with precision, guiding loyal operatives from the shadows. Every move, every signal, every whispered command was calculated, and through it all Jae-hyun could feel the bond between him and Lana tightening. Each glance, each subtle touch a silent acknowledgement of the love and trust that had grown in the darkest corners of his life. The first wave of the attack came just past midnight. Black SUVs roared down the narrow streets toward the locations of his operations. Armed men moved with calculated brutality, expecting minimal resistance. But Lana's foresight had prepared a trap. Streets had been cleared, decoys positioned, and loyal guards were strategically hidden. The attackers were caught off guard, disoriented by sudden blockades and precise counterattacks. Jae-hyun watched from his penthouse, every heartbeat echoing with tension. He felt a pang of helplessness, but Lana's presence beside him was a constant reminder that he was not alone. Together, they guided their allies through the chaos, calling out orders, analyzing movements, and predicting enemy behavior. For the first time since his paralysis, Jae-hyun felt the surge of adrenaline that came from true command. Not just of an empire, but of his own destiny. Amid the chaos, the enemy leader appeared in person, a man who had once been considered Jae-hyun's equal. The confrontation was inevitable. Lana's eyes met Jae-hyun's, silently communicating a shared understanding this fight was theirs to win, or theirs to fall. With her by his side, Jae-hyun felt an unshakable courage. The battle was intense. Gunfire echoed, cars crashed, and screams punctuated the night. Jae-hyun, in his wheelchair, directed the defense with uncanny precision. His mind, sharp as ever, anticipated every move. Lana moved with grace and deadly efficiency, taking down attackers who underestimated her skill and determination. Together, they became a force that neither the rival gang nor the streets of Seoul had ever seen before. A master and his protector, bound by trust, loyalty, and love. In a critical moment, the enemy leader cornered Jae-hyun, assuming he could finish him off with ease. But Lana intervened, her body moving like a shadow, blocking the attack with perfect timing. The struggle was brutal, but Lana's determination never wavered. She disarmed the enemy, securing Jae-hyun's safety, while simultaneously proving that her love was not a weakness. It was his greatest strength. As dawn approached, the streets fell silent. The rival faction had been defeated, their plans dismantled, and Jae-hyun's empire, though tested, remained intact. Exhausted but victorious, he and Lana returned to the penthouse. For the first time in months, the weight of fear and betrayal lifted, replaced by a fragile but undeniable sense of peace. Hyun looked at Lana, his heart swelling with emotion he could no longer suppress. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You've done more than protect me. You've saved me, from them, from the world, and from myself." Lana's lips curved into a small, tender smile. "You don't need to thank me. I've always loved you, Jaehyun. More than I probably should have. But it's true." The words hung in the air, a confession as raw and vulnerable as any act of loyalty or violence they had endured. Hyun felt tears prick his eyes. A rare moment of human weakness that he welcomed. In the midst of the darkness, betrayal, and danger, they had found each other. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and Lana took it in hers. The simple touch spoke volumes. Trust, love, and an unspoken promise of facing the future together, no matter what challenges remained. In that moment, neither wealth, power, nor fear mattered. What mattered was them. The paralyzed Mafia king and the black maid who had never abandoned him. The days that followed were quieter, yet no less profound. Hyun began to rebuild, not just his empire, but himself. He allowed Lana to become his equal partner, not in title, but in life. Together, they navigated the treacherous waters of the Mafia world, their bond a source of strength and hope. Former allies, seeing their unwavering unity, returned with renewed loyalty, and even the city seemed to recognize that Hyun was no longer alone. And amidst the lingering shadows of betrayal, amidst the whispers of danger that never fully disappeared, a simple truth endured: love, loyalty, and courage could overcome even the darkest of nights. Lana had proven that true devotion was not measured by wealth, beauty, or power, but by the unwavering commitment to stand beside someone when the world turned its back. As the sun rose over Seoul, bathing the city in golden light, Hyun wheeled himself to the balcony, Lana at his side. The skyline stretched endlessly before them, a testament to survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bond they had forged. The air was filled with promise, not danger, with warmth, not fear. He turned to her, eyes glistening with emotion. "We survived it all together," he whispered. Lana smiled, her hand resting over his. "Together," she echoed, the single word carrying the weight of countless battles, whispered confessions, and shared victories. In that moment, the world felt still. The city, the gangs, the betrayal. They all existed, but they no longer defined Hyun's life. What mattered was the love that had bloomed in the unlikeliest of places, the loyalty that had never wavered, and the future they would face side by side. And so, the paralyzed Korean Mafia king and his black maid found a peace few could imagine. A life forged in fire, strengthened by adversity, and sanctified by love. The empire, though tested, remained. The city, though dangerous, was theirs to navigate, and most importantly, their hearts, though once scarred, beat in unison for the first time in years. If you were captivated by Hyun and Lana's journey through betrayal, danger, and unbreakable love, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next heart-stopping story filled with passion, loyalty, and unexpected twists. Every story brings you closer to the lives of characters who fight against fate, and maybe, just maybe, change the world around them.